I chose the lion, also known as king of the beast, and I chose this because I have been intrigued by this species since childhood, so I was excited to take the opportunity to dissect the different traits and characteristics of the species to see why it was given such a powerful nickname. Lions have been seen all throughout history, from accompanying pharaohs in battle to being carved into the walls of Europe. The lion has represented courage, bravery, and fearlessness for centuries. It belongs to the Felidae family along with the tiger, the leopard, and the jaguar. Together they are known as the roaring cats. And in this phylogenetic tree here, we can see sort of the evolutionary hypothesis for how these species have diverged over time. They all started as domestic cats, and they have developed into their own separate species. It's evident that the lion was the last to diverge as and is therefore the most evolved, which is fairly obvious as comparing physical traits. So the lion has a mane, which the other species lack, and the lion itself lacks any spots or stripes. When taking a deeper look into the history of wildcats, we can see a relationship beyond just physical outward appearance. Evolutionary similarities and differences are evident when comparing brain neuroimages of the different species as well. So this green represents brains, and they are scaled to size so that you can compare the brain size among each genus and species. And then over here, comparing specifically the leopard represented as B and the cheetah represented as A, we can see a multitude of different similarities and differences in the physiological anatomy here. So both brains have about the same sulci in the same order. However, the leopard represents the PC sulcus, which is not present in the cheetah brain. Also, the cheetah brain is significantly smaller in volume when compared to the leopard brain. Hopping down to graph B, we can compare the volume of the posterior cerebrum to the rest of the endocranium. So by taking these top 4 dots here, we can say these 4 species or genuses have the largest brain by volume. So when we look at the color key, we can see that each 4 of these top 4 dots are related. They are a part of the same genus, the Panthera genus. So from this, we can conclude that brain volume can be used to possibly relate each species and hypothesize their evolutionary divergences. Lions operate in groups called prides. The number of individuals per pride is variable, and it varies dependent on how dominant and how resistant to attack the pride is. They consist of a dominant male, lionesses, cubs, and sometimes a few inferior males, although only the dominant male will mate with the lionesses. They are a polygamous breed. The dominant male of the pride has the responsibility of protecting the young and the females of the pride. And this female to male ratio depicted in this picture here is very common, as females will never leave a pride, and males are culturally evicted around their age of maturity by the dominant male, which is about 2 or 3 years old. From there, they will go and form a nomadic coalition with their fellow brothers and sisters. As far as the dominant male, he holds his position until another male dominates him in a takeover and takes his place. The important key factor is that the driving ambition of each dominant lion is A, preservation of territory, and B, the longevity of his bloodline. In order to ensure these things, he must gain and maintain dominance, and in order to do this, he must cross onto the territory of a dominant male, challenge him in a takeover, and win. Takeovers are often fight to the death, and it is possible for a pride to have more than one dominant male, usually brothers. However, it's more rare than it is likely. This cycle sort of maintains that the new dominant male is from a different pride, which prevents inbreeding with a related female, which can result in genetic mutation, ultimately compromising his bloodline. Infanticide is a very common practice once a new male takes over, and this is for 2 reasons. The first being cubs are completely helpless, vulnerable, and dependent on adult lions, which is of price to his energy expenditure. They have to catch food to feed them, fight enemies to protect them, and as the driving ambition of each dominant lion is preservation of his territory and longevity of his bloodline, the dominant lion is not going to waste energy on a cub who will only pass on the genetics of another lion. The second reason being, when a lioness is caring for her young, she's not going to be interested in mating, which also prevents this new lion from passing on his genes. However, when he kills her young, it induces her into estrus, also known as her reproductive period of fertility. Once young males are rejected from their prides and they form these nomadic coalitions, they're on a hunt for dominance. So we see this increase in entering number of nomadic coalitions, which increases the proportion of takeovers. And likewise here, we see an increase in entering nomadic coalitions and a decrease in proportion of cubs surviving. From this data, we can see that these nomadic coalitions are attacking prides to gain dominance, they're overthrowing the dominant male, and they're killing the cubs. Prides are believed to be this altruistic concept, as lionesses of the same pride have been observed to help each other, balance responsibilities. However, this is a big misconception, as the actual reason in which they hang together is a defense mechanism. They are more likely to fight off predators, defend their cubs, and even prevent attacks if they band together. It's actually been observed that mothers preserve their milk solely for their young, and they're very hesitant to nurse cubs which are not theirs. Since the dominant male is responsible for protecting the pride and its territory, female lions are often falsely represented as submissive and incapable. But this is just another misconception, as lionesses contribute equally, as they are the primary hunters of the pride. They typically prey on herbivores such as buffalo, zebras, wildebeest, and even birds, as seen here. Female lions have adopted this efficient strategy with given roles to optimize the odds of prey capture while minimizing energy expenditure. They're split into either wings or centers. Centers are responsible for ambushing and attacking the prey in the center, while the wings are distributed along the perimeter to trap the prey if it gets away from the center. This could also often be kind of thought of like an offense versus defense in a sport. This strategy is very effective, as it decreases the energy cost of capturing prey and decreases the likelihood of the prey escaping. Going back to some more anatomy here, we see a significant difference in volume of the anterior cortex between the male and female sexes. This portion of the brain is responsible for socialness, and judging the behavior of the male versus female, we can see that the females are much more social, as they are typically always found with nursing their cubs and found with other females, and they never leave the prides, whereas males are evicted from their prides and they're in nomadic coalitions, and even when they're the dominant male, they spend most of their time in solitude. Lionesses ultimately manipulate the fate of the entire savanna ecosystem, as lions are a keystone species, and their hunting patterns directly regulate the populations of the herbivores below them. So the hypothetical decrease or removal of the lion population would ultimately propose three threats to its ecosystem. We would see an increase in herbivore population, which would lead to an increase in competition between herbivore species for food, and then it would ultimately negatively affect the productivity rate of producers as demand increases, risking extinction. One key advantage of the lion that it has over other species is that it has this extra elastic ligament on its hyoid bone. So we see it present in the male and not present in the female here. This ligament allows for their infamous roar, which frightens off threats and is used as a warning sign or threat to not enter their territory, and it's also a form of communication. This roar can be heard up to 5 miles away, which is the equivalent of 88 football fields. Lions are also extremely territorial, so scent marking by means of defecation and urination allows lions to warn others what essentially belongs to them. It's a promising way to prevent enemies from entering their territory where their cubs and lionesses are that they need to protect. Prides often keep their land for generations, and scent marking is one way that this is possible, even though a negative effect of it is that it is costly in terms of energy expenditure, because the more they walk around, the more energy they're forfeiting. Lastly, the mane. The mane is for protection, but it's also a key indicator of vulnerability. For example, darker manes are associated with higher testosterone levels and faster rates of recovery from injuries, which means they're most likely to win in a fight. So predators such as hyenas, jackals, and leopards are less likely to go for a male if he has a darker mane. The lion also has acute damaging papillae prevalent on its tongue, which are there to abrade meat off bones of their prey. And this sharp papillae they're essential in allowing them to essentially feed or efficiently feed on larger animals, because they ultimately decrease the necessary energy when consuming such large animals. The lion is currently listed as a vulnerable species and is predicted to go extinct by the year 2050. Humans can be blamed for this dramatic increase, as far as factors like habitat loss, fragmentation, human-wildlife interaction, and poaching. We can see that there's been a large decline in the amount of lion territory. So historic range is represented in this beige, and then dark red is current range. We can see about a 75% decrease of lion territory over the last 50 years. This is due to an increase in need for land. Ultimately, as population increases, the need for housing and infrastructure increases, which requires building into the land of lions, pushing them into either territory which is already occupied either by other lion prides or by humans. Either way, it's a catch-22 because lions are very territorial, even amongst other lions. They have a zero tolerance policy for intruders, and they will attack and most likely fight to the death. Likewise, settlers, it's very typical of them to kill lions on site to prevent them from attacking their livestock. Poaching has been a rising threat since 2014 and is now one of the leading reasons for human-caused deaths among lions. This data here is from a study conducted in 2 different national parks of the Greater Limpopo Lion Conservation Unit in Africa. Data was essentially taken from deceased lions, and it was collected to determine the cause of death and whether it was related to poaching or whichever category. So to accurately conclude if the lion was killed for means of poaching, 3 observations were need to be checked. 1, lack of indication of human-lion conflict, so being close to a village where there was livestock that they were likely preying after. 2, proof of intent to cause death, so presence of poison. And thirdly, the removal of body parts that could be used for sale, like teeth and claws that are used to make jewelry. So with these conditions, it was concluded that a majority, we see a heavy weight of numbers being weighed with targeted poaching. We see it not being present at all before 2015, and then we see represented with this solid black fill that poaching has become a rising threat. In conclusion, the lion is king of the beasts not because of its calm, mysterious, and intimidating posture, but because this species, the male must fight to keep his crown and control of his territory daily, even in the midst of a very violent culture. It's also king because of the female, who manipulates the fate of the rest of the ecosystem by her hunting. The lion is a keystone species in which the male and the female equally contribute their unique traits to fulfill their responsibilities. The fate of the rest of the ecosystem depends on this balance.